I had long, for many years, I have been volunteering in ambulances in Italy and working with the 118, the equivalent of the 911 in Italy. So doing emergency services, night, days, Saturday nights, Sunday nights, whenever my studies would allow me. So I decided to focus more on public health, mostly I would say by chance. I decided I wanted to do something different. I wanted to explore something different, to be challenged. And the opportunity arose to go to Tanzania, to Zanzibar, beautiful place. Of course, it made me fall in love with Africa, because it's easy to fall in love with Africa in Zanzibar. And Africa has not been always as kind with me as in Zanzibar, because when I started working in other contexts, initially in Eastern Chad, with the refugees and the IDPs during the Darfur War in 2007. And but there I became really extremely interested and also compelled about working in humanitarian sector and in public health. And that's where I actually decided to then even further study and pursue my education further in that direction, doing then a PhD in epidemiology. And I remember when they asked me what I wanted to do in 5 years, where I wanted to be during the interview for my PhD, my answer was everywhere but here in that university. Because I told them I just want to get these skills to go back where I'm coming from, to Africa, because that's where I feel at home. That's where I think that I belong. That's where I really feel that my skills are needed. At that time, my understanding was of Africa as a continent was still relatively limited. I knew Tanzania and what I could read, but so I was still very naive. But still, I had this desire. And after my PhD finished, I came to Kenya because of the Somalia program. It was 2011. It was the peak of the famine in Somalia, and I started working in different contexts, quite challenging. Initially, very much in South Central Somalia, with Shabelle, Mogadishu, and then with an international NGO, an Italian international NGO. And then I started opening new programs in other countries, particularly Central African Republic during the civil war in 2014, in Yemen in 2015 during the peak of the conflict, spending time in Sana'a in some of the worst times. And I continued developing this desire to really improve the health systems in context where the health systems don't work or don't even exist anymore, because they're completely collapsed. One of the last countries I worked in was Sierra Leone, a country that was sufficiently strong, let's say, before Ebola struck, but that the epidemic of Ebola in West Africa showed the fragility of a system that was mined from the ground and obviously collapsed very quickly. So this to say, I've been always working very much abroad. I've been working in Kenya partially, but not so much, because here was, the system was probably working better, and the kind of emergency work I was doing was not, fortunately, needed. At the same time, I was proved. One of the certainties that I had was that certainly the health systems also in Kenya is not particularly strong, despite what we may think. And it was proved in one of the most brutal ways, with the death of my wife, that actually there is a lot to be done also also in Kenya, as I wrote in the article I published, I've been facing wars, famines, conflicts to strengthen health systems abroad, and then I got stung by the health system at home. So, yeah, this is me, and of course, who I am is not only the work I do. I would say I'm a husband, or I was a husband for almost 3 years, and very much in love with my wife, with my future wife back then, for almost 5. We met actually the 5th of March 2012, so about almost 5 years. And I'm certainly a father of a beautiful, almost 2-year-old. Her name is Sofia Francesca Akwabi. And Akwabi is a Luya name because my wife was Luya, and I use the past because my wife died a few weeks ago, unfortunately. And I'm a son also, and I have a beautiful family in Italy who is very close to me right now. I'm a son-in-law of the family of Eunice, and I think I'm a friend, and I'm happy to say that this period has showed the importance of friendship, of the many friends that came and became very close. You know, they were close, but they showed their closeness to me during this period. So I would say that this is me, if I have to give it a nutshell. And they talk a lot. I talk a lot, yeah. So that's another characteristic of myself, and I talk even more in this period. It helps.
You mentioned Eunice, and of course, no one would know her better than you, the man who loved her, and the man who was married to her. So, could you please tell us a bit about Eunice and the kind of person that she was?
Well, Eunice, I would say, was amazing. That's the first thing I would say. If I have to use a single word, you know, if someone would ask me how was Eunice, using a single word, or even how is Eunice, amazing was a word that I used a lot, almost constantly, even when she was alive. When Eunice was good at defining individuals, and she was even good at defining herself. You know, her interest in individuals was a specific, a peculiar aspect of her. She also studied psychology, you know, in her bachelor. So that's maybe one. She got also the skills of being interested in people. But I know that since she was a child, she was, you know, a starer, I would say, someone who looks at people who are interested in the human nature, who is interested in the human nature. So she defined herself as well as mom, wife, anesthetist, entrepreneur, addicted to challenge. This is what she wrote about herself one day, and she decided to write it also on her Facebook, you know, as a status, or her description rather than status. She would have never known that would be what will be written on her gravestone as well. But it's true. It's true. She was all these things. She was a mom, a very dedicated mother. Being a mom was one of the things she was the most proud of. Educating our daughter, seeing our daughter grow, was her greatest joy, above everything else. She was a wife, the best wife you could ever dream of. And I say it meaning it. I say it with extreme pain, having lost her so recently. She was the kind of person who in a relationship nurtures it, who who to her husband is just dedicated, faithful, loving, caring. She was the person who was, always giving me the strength when something was not going all right. She was the person who would understand when I come back stressed from the field, who would tell me, "You're home, you're safe." Because the person was every evening, whenever I was away, sending me a good night message with videos that are all in this phone. And now even the idea of watching them probably is like opening a Pandora's box that I will have to open in a little while. And she was a doctor, anesthetist as a kind of doctor. We were two doctors, two different fields. Her was the clinical one, I was the public health side. Anesthesiologists are anesthesia is one of the most complex medical sciences. It requires a deep understanding of physiology, of which she had a degree as well, because she did a double major when she did her bachelor. She studied in Canada, University of Western Ontario. She did, as I said, psychology and physiology. And she loved being a doctor. Being a doctor defined her very much. She was a person who was there for everybody. She was the doctor, literally, of everybody of her friend, If someone had a problem, would call Eunice and ask for an advice. And Eunice would tell whether you have to go to the hospital, whether you should go and do some test, or simply not to be worried too much, wait a little bit. Everybody was trusting her. But she wasn't, she wasn't just dispensing advices without, just as sometimes doctors just give out without too much, or with carelessness. She was extremely careful. She knew very much, how much trusted doctors are in this country and in general around the world, and how easy, that for quacks to just start dispensing advices. So for her, being a doctor was being thorough, making sure that what she was saying was backed by evidence. Okay? And as I said, an anesthetist, one of the most difficult specialties. She was in the second year of residence. And she worked very, very hard. She started, the first year was particularly hard, was very challenging, because she had to study, had lessons, had exams, and had lots of clinical duties. The first year of anesthesia, which was basically last year, we spent very little time together. Time that really we promised back to each other, and of course that now we can't enjoy anymore. But we dedicated that to that time to that education, because there are so few anesthetists in this country. She knew that they are needed. And she also knew that, for example, one of the aspects of anesthesia that are more neglected in an already neglected field is critical care, working in ICU, for example. And she was leaning towards that with the idea of subspecializing later on that. She was already preparing her thesis, her master's thesis that she would have had to defend on the fourth year. She had picked the topic. She was very much ahead. She knew what she wanted. She knew which was her path. She knew what she wanted to achieve. So she picked a very particular topic, a topic that was, as everything that she picked in her life, challenging for her. controversial for the establishment in general. She wanted to compare different critical care systems, comparing the one of Kenya with the one of other countries, both in Africa and in other continents, to understand which are the gaps, which are the pitfalls of the Kenyan system, learning from other systems how to improve the system at home. She wanted to use that as potentially as a roadmap for her future work as a critical care specialist, so that she could eventually be able to improve the way critical care is administered in Kenya, because resources are limited, numbers of doctors are limited. She had many ideas, and some of them are technical, so I'm not going to deal so much in them, but she had very many ideas. And being a volcano of ideas, I would say, it's the other characteristic of her, entrepreneurship. And by being entrepreneur, her style of entrepreneurship was a volcanic one of having millions of ideas and trying them out in her head, all of them, and then testing some of them out, those that made sense to her. She would discuss them with me. She wanted to know what I thought about them, but to be fully honest, 99.7% of the ideas that she was putting then to test were hers, with a little bit of contribution and more discussion from my side, more like kind of, yeah, that sounds so good. That was lots of my my contribution. In many cases was that, because they were so brilliant. They were so brilliant, and I provided input, for example, from a public health perspective, in some cases, because she had medical ideas too. She was an entrepreneur at very wide spectrum, because she had a very wide interest. I don't want to digress too much, but just to give you a hint, when we started dating, we actually met on Facebook randomly when she was in Dominican Republic, and then I'll explain you something about that in the last bit of her personality. She was in Dominican Republic, and by chance we got connected over Facebook by common friends. I just moved to Kenya. I wanted to have advisors. She was Kenyan. So we started chatting, and she basically became a person to me that sounded so amazing, as I said, that I wanted to know more about her. So I did something, that many people do these days. I Googled her. What I found was astonishing. She had published on a variety of topics, from hair products in Spanish to the life of baby boomers and the challenges of baby boomers, to how to debug a computer, to how to transfer files from DivX to I don't know which other format, just because it was a way to be interested in everything, and it was a way to even be an entrepreneur, because this was a little business for her as well. Like she was earning some money by writing articles. She was a very talented writer. So, as I said, her spectrum of entrepreneurship was very wide. There were two things probably that interested her the most. One were hair, and she was passionate about hair. And she lived in the Dominican Republic, where hair, going to the stylist, to the salon, as they call it, it's almost a religion. She used to tell me that if you don't have your hair done, that's a good justification not going to a party. And the other one was medical entrepreneurship. Those two were her main interests. So as part of the hair entrepreneurship, since the time she was in Dominican Republic, she wrote a book on how to treat natural hair, how to treat weaves, a book that she sold a few thousand copies. That was one of the first things that I discovered by Googling her, that beautiful doctor who was living the other side of the world actually had very much knowledge about hair, apart also about the life of baby boomers. And so we started importing together hair products from Italy. She contacted a company in Italy that produces some natural hair products, and she wanted to start. She saw a gap here, so she wanted to start a market here on that, and it was just at the beginning, but still people were extremely interested in these kind of products. And the other one, and she dispensed advices on hair to everybody, as much as she dispensed advices on medical issues. As a doctor, she dispensed advices on with the same quantity, with the same level of understanding about, how to style your hair. It's in a way something that let me think. I don't know if you can ever think positively about a death, but the fact that one of the last things she was doing was something she enjoyed. She went to the salon. She collapsed in front of the salon after she had her hair done. So she went to do something she enjoyed very much, to work on her hair, to use her own products and so on. And that was basically the last thing she did when she was alive. So she was able to do something she really liked as her last activity on her last day on Earth. The last entrepreneurship that she was focused on was medical one. She was working on a website that would have given access to information about doctors, because she realized that one of the gaps that there are in Kenya, and in general, really, in many African countries, is that there is since there is not really a system of public health that directs you to a specialist, you are obliged somehow to first decide which specialist you want to see yourself, without exactly knowing which one you need, because you don't have a GP where you go to and then he directs you or she directs you to the right doctor. So you have to figure out a little bit which kind of doctor you need on the basis of your symptoms. So that was the first aspect of that website, something that would have explained some basic concepts of what different doctors do, so that you could understand which doctor you may need. And then it would have provided you with a database of all the doctors that are out there, and so that you can choose the one that maybe suits better your needs. And for example, that if you need a dermatologist, or if you need a cardiologist, maybe on the basis of the insurance that this person takes, or the location, or even potentially reviews. Right now, the doctors can advertise themselves. So, because right now, if you really, the way people ask for doctors is going on Facebook and say, "Hey, do you know a dermatologist?" This is not exactly the best way to, I have these symptoms, which doctor should I go to, and can you advise for one? Facebook is not exactly the best arena for doing that. And she was actually, one of her last ideas, just a few nights before dying, was tapping in one other critical need that she identified, critical gap that she identified in Kenya, which was again critical care, which since it was such an interest for her. She was just about to order some of those dolls that are needed for doing CPR and first aid. She wanted to run first aid training and BLS, basic life support training, to the community, to individuals, starting from our community in Laurasia. Inviting people and delivering a training. And, using that both as a way to being an entrepreneur, because that could have been a way to run a training that she was a certified also trainer on ETAT, which is one training for emergency medicine. But also a way to do something socially incredibly important. Because the fact that what happened to her also demonstrated that people don't know what to do when something like that happens. When someone collapses, people have no idea what to do because no one has done a training. In most cases, no one has done a training of the commune, of the wananchi, but also of the people who just, maybe even the security guards, they may have done one long time ago, a very light one, and then they don't know what to do. So the last characteristic she defined herself is addicted to challenge. And I think that's a little bit summarizes herself. For her, easy was not good. Easy was not enough. Easy was good only when it was nimble, when it was something that was smart, then when it was elegant in its delivery. But easy as an easy path, no. That was not her. Just to give you an idea of what means addicted to challenge for Eunice. After Canada, she wanted to study medicine. And Canada at that time closed a little bit the quota for foreign students, more than a little bit, basically closed the quota for foreign students. So it would have been much harder for her to study in Canada. She decided to go study somewhere else. And she went in holiday once to Dominican Republic. Dominican Republic, it's a part of an island in the Caribbean. The island is called Hispaniola. It's in, let's say, south of the United States, south of Florida, and west of Mexico. And it's divided in two. One side is Dominican Republic. The other side is a little bit more known because of some disasters that happened, Haiti. So she went to Dominican Republic. And she loved the place. And she decided she wanted to study there. So there you have a person who decides to study medicine in the other side of the world, where she would have been the only Kenyan who would have stayed that long in a country. They had to stop her for 3 nights in Heathrow because they had to figure out how to let her immigrate in the Dominican Republic because they had basically no rules for Kenyans. The closest embassy was one, I think, there is a Kenyan embassy, I think in Jamaica. But basically she was looking at the one of the United States to have things done. And she was basically the only Kenyan in the island. And she went there and studied medicine in a language she didn't speak. And after a few months, she became a tutor of calculus, one of the most complex subjects that you have in medical, in the first year, foundation year of medicine, to students, to her fellow students. She was tutoring them in Spanish on calculus. After a few weeks, she was already on billboards of the university across town, across Santo Domingo, the capital of the Dominican Republic. On billboards, on buses, as identifying her as like a Universidad Internacional, an international university, because now they had even a Kenyan. So she was loved by everybody, and she was, just seamlessly being able to achieve everything. To graduate magna cum laude, to be the life of the party, to be to be popular, to be known, to write articles about. At that time, she wrote articles on how racism was prevalent in Dominican Republic, a country where there is not a color, because it's such a mixed country that there are Dominicans that are extremely black on the color spectrum, and some that are whiter than me. So, and yet there is racism in the country in which there is no race. So she wrote an article in the newspaper after she was denied entrance in a club. This article, as much as the article she wrote, resonated in the entire country, was picked up, became a sort of symbol of how the country was becoming, how a foreigner had to tell them what was happening. They felt shamed, but at the same time grateful that someone finally said things as they were. And after at the end of the year, at the end of the last year of medicine, when she was about to graduate, we met, as I said, casually on Facebook. Just, me asking for information and her finding funny that I just moved to Kenya and I would have had a house for the next 2 weeks and I didn't know where to go. And asking me what was passing through my mind when I decided to go to Somalia without knowing exactly what was going on there, at that time. She came here, and exactly as seamlessly everything worked out for her in the Dominican Republic. Things worked out here. She came in March, and between August and March, we just talked to each other. We chatted, we Skyped, every day long emails. So by the time she came here, after 7-8 months, I knew everything about her. At our first date,
March 5th?
It was March 5th, our first date. Yeah. At our first date, and she arrived a little bit early. She arrived 3 days before, but then she spent a couple of days with her mom. And I say, by the way, I met a person. And her mom obviously probably was surprised that she met a person in 2 days, so she had to explain what happened. Anyway, without digressing too much, things worked out perfectly, for us. We were very happy. We were very, very happy. We moved in together. She became a TV star. She became a TV star. Call it again, addicted to challenge. She had few months free waiting for the exam, for the board exam to come. She decided to apply for this program called Uongozi, which was run on NTV in 2013, just before the elections. And she got selected as the diaspora representative. She was all over TV all the time. She was on billboards. I remember once I was coming down from Sololo, Moyale. I was up there for a mission, for a technical visit. And I think around Archer's Post, a place very remote, there was a billboard, gigantic, like the ones on the highways, with her face. And I said to the driver, "That's my girlfriend." And the driver looked at me like, "Yeah, and I'm the President of the United States." She was just amazing. She just was able to achieve and transform into something beautiful and great. Everything she touched everything she put her mind on. She arrived third in Mongozi. She started, that gave her the drive also of being more committed on issues of leadership and on issues of good leadership, particularly, and of civic education of the community. So that was her, and our life, as I said, was happy until the end. Until the end, was very happy. We got engaged, we got married, a beautiful marriage. We had a child who was the light of our eyes, and now is the light of mine. Only, but I know that in a way she's still there with her. Whichever are your beliefs, I think that she's with her, she's looking after her. And just a little personal thing, we never took anything for granted. We knew that we were lucky. She knew that she was lucky. She knew that she put lots of efforts in making sure that things she was putting her mind on were going well, were successful, but because she put efforts, mind, heart in that. But she never took anything for granted, including our relationship. We always, whenever we called each other, we always ended every single phone conversation, as I remember, with "I love you" and "I love you too." And I called her, she was just finishing the hairdresser, just to tell her I would have brought our daughter Sophia to a play date, to a play group. It was just, a normal conversation. And we ended, as always, "I love you too." Those were our last words we told to each other. So, yeah, she never took anything for granted. This was Eunice. Dr. Eunice, and for me, the piccola, as I used to call her, the love of my life.
She sounds like she was a very amazing woman, Sounds like she was a very amazing woman, Everything you said about her, she fought through it, she worked hard, she was bold, And as we want to celebrate the International Women's Day, the theme is about being bold for change. And from everything you said, she really does sound bold. But is there any one maybe situation, whether it's in your personal private life or it's a work-related occurrence, where you recall seeing how bold she is and just describing that character within her as just being a bold person?
Well, I think what happened 3 days before her death shows how bold she was. So it was something that she was thinking about for quite some time, looking at what was happening in Kenya, looking at the situation that was developing in Kenya, looking at herself being a doctor and working in a private facility, the largest private facility in Kenya, and actually the largest in East Africa, Kenyatta National Hospital. She could witness their issues, critical issues, on how the wananchi, those who can't access private care, those who can't afford to travel to the UK, travel to India, as many people who are very rich or very powerful do when they get sick. She witnessed how basic services like medical services would not be attainable, would not be sufficient, would not be enough, would not be good enough for the individuals of this country, for her fellow citizens. It was unacceptable for her, some of the situations she witnessed. I'm not going to go into details because it's not the time and it's not the forum for doing that. But she certainly saw many of that. And at the same time, she saw the challenges that this country is facing in terms of corruption, for example, with regard to funds mismanagement. I'm not going to go into details. It's known, it's widely known what has happened. For example, with I think 5 billions at a certain point disappeared in the Ministry of Health, and it's unclear what has happened with that money. With 5 billion shillings, you could definitely improve some of the services. So the fact that there were critical issues with the basic services that Kenya can give to its citizens, and at the same time that there was an acceptance particularly from the middle upper class, that is the one she identified as the one who has the power to say something, because it's the one who can access information more easily, who has also the resources and the quality of life that doesn't require them to concentrate simply on living day by day, of having, hand-to-mouth kind of life. Because if you are living hand-to-mouth, it's clear that you can't concentrate really on challenging the system, on asking for better services. But if you instead have a good life, then you have the time, the skills, the resources, also the power really, to go and demand for a change. So she was very bold in writing an article, and even the title of the article was extremely bold. The new Mau Mau revolution. She used something that resonates in every Kenyan. Mau Mau. Mau Mau were heroes. Mau Mau were those that freed this country, or contributed to free this country from the colonialism during the colonial past, and ensure that citizens could be given the power to decide for themselves, and citizens could be given the power to now have services and benefit of a government that takes care of themselves. And she realized that it was time for another Mau Mau revolution. That is not, of course, that doesn't mean a revolution in the sense of that a person might imagine something up in arms or things like that. No, a revolution of the mind and a revolution of the hearts. A revolution of individuals that realize that when things are wrong and unjust, and when there is no when a country where they live in is, she used the term betraying its citizens, and this is her term, and I like to use her words because they are not mine. I would have never had the boldness and even the skills probably and understanding of the context perhaps to write something with such a level, such a depth. So she identified that what was happening could be stopped, could be changed more than stopped, only if the upper middle class would have recognized that they have the power to demand change. And this is the revolution she's talking about. She, even if you read the article, she's not asking for people to do anything particularly bold, really, I would say, but just use your resources, just take care of something you are interested in, just focus on something you care about and work on that. Challenge the people who represent you to make sure that what they promised you is being implemented. Challenge those that represent you that what interests you is part of their agenda. So that was what she was saying to its fellow citizens. And the way she said it, in a very gentle and yet bold way, strong and convincing, is, I think, something that shows her boldness. I think is the epitome of its boldness. And unfortunately, what she said proved to be true. I can say without doubt, she got betrayed by the country she loved so much. She got betrayed when she fainted and no one did anything. She got betrayed when she fainted and she was left lie on the ground for over 1 hour and a half, simply because there is no basic ambulance service that can be called and show up by its citizens. There is not. Despite the big cars, the big malls, the wealth that in many parts of Nairobi, particularly in that part of Nairobi, Westlands, where this occurred. We're talking about the heart of Westlands, 4 p.m. on a Friday afternoon, one of the busiest times. Despite having occurred in one of the wealthiest areas, where wealthy people pass, where there are lots of banks, there is no ambulance. And this is a basic service that citizens should make the government accountable for, because really what happened to her also demonstrated that can happen to anybody. It's not just the person that maybe it happens, you see that is maybe a homeless lying down on the side of the highway. It's not only those people who risk their life by trying to cross the highway, the Waiyaki highway, even jumping over the fence, and sometimes they knocked down by a passing car. It's literally everybody, you, me, and him. If collapse on the ground, we would be left there for dead. Because there is no basic service, because no one asked and challenged the institution, the government, the authorities, whatever is deputed for ensuring that basic services such as that one are available, to make sure that the resources are allocated for that, and to make sure that if resources are allocated to that, then they're well used, they are being put to use, that they are not wasted. Because if maybe you have, I don't know, some resources that you allocate, you have, for example, an ambulance, but you don't have the nurses that can go on that ambulance, you don't have the paramedics who can go to that ambulance, then obviously that doesn't mean that the ambulance will go and rescue its citizens. So that was something extremely bold of her, and something that made me so proud. So proud. When I read it, I went to her, gave her a big kiss, and told her, I'm so proud of you. And she had, even to challenge her friends, because her friends, like herself, are part of the upper middle class, middle upper class, sorry. And they got struck by this, because it's, when someone is telling you the truth, very often the truth is a little bit ugly to hear the first time. So they felt, kind of a little bit hit by this, like, oh, wait a second, how you're saying we are not caring enough about issues that affect our country? Why you say that? I mean, why we should even, really? The answer was not even how you're saying that, but more like why we should be so much interested in that. At the end, we are living a good life. We just go, we do our duty, but then we don't need to do the extra mile and caring about something and making sure that something is happening. And what happened to her, they were already in the process of changing their mind. by hearing her, by discussing with her, by understanding her point. It was only 3 days after that she died. So her friends were so much now buying into that. And what happened to her just demonstrated how right she was in the most brutal way.
How do you think Eunice's story, in terms of her boldness, how she would write, how her character was, and even unfortunately, the circumstances of her death, how do you think that should inspire people to come out, especially women, and be bold and take a chance and, try to make a difference like Eunice did?
Well, I think women are leaders in nature. I've been witnessing many instances in which women are leaders, even when they are not for the society. Women often are those that make sure that a family thrives and survives in the worst conditions. The presence of women is what often makes the difference between the life and the death of a household in the most desperate conditions, like conditions I've seen, I have witnessed, IDPs, refugees, wars, famines. Women are resilient. Women are resourceful. Women have ideas. They have bold ideas. They go the extra mile, and they use their imagination to be able to make sure that they are able to provide and to thrive. And I think that what she wrote and her ideas inspired many. I know that for sure because after I wrote the article, let's say, you can call it eulogy if you want. It was a way to channel also my emotions after what had happened, and to honor her as a doctor, as a wife, as someone who inspired me. I received hundreds of messages, hundreds, from all over the world. I received messages particularly from other health professionals around the world, people who are studying or are working maybe in the United States or in the UK. They told me that they want to come back, to follow her path, to change the system, to challenge. I received messages from people who say that they changed their point of view. They felt that they were in a cocoon of that kind of comfort. They were part of the system, and now inspired them to go out and finally speak and say, no more. We want a system that works. We deserve a system that works. Our children deserve a system that works. And so I think that her inspiration has been on multiple ways, has occurred on multiple ways. She has inspired people directly. I can think about her pupils. She was teaching Spanish to some children, as another thing. She was speaking Spanish so well. As another side thing, she was a tutor of Spanish to some family friends. And I know that those children were inspired by her. Those kids, well, they're not children actually, they're late adolescents. They were inspired by her. And she touched lives in the most real way. I got messages from relatives of patients whose lives she saved, saying that they couldn't thank her back then, and they wanted to say how much she changed their life. So being a doctor also inspired other people, I'm sure, to become a doctor. When teenagers were seeing her, being a doctor, being beautiful, being smart, people, girls say, I want to be a doctor too. So I think it's difficult to say exactly how she may have inspired people, how people will put in practice what they learned from her. I can speak for myself, because I got inspired by her since the time I started dating her. I knew more about myself and the world that surrounds me than I ever did. I became a better person. And I hope in my little, I try to make also the world a better place. And that was also thanks to her, particularly thanks to her inspiration. And I became bolder. I became a person who speaks his mind. I became a person who comes here and says these things. I became a person who is able to take care of a child alone, who is bold enough to say, yes, I can do it. Yes, I can. I have this child and make sure she grows up, and she grows up knowing how an amazing person her mom was. I'm ready to go through with Sophia over and over everything. In ancient Greece, heroes were supposed to die young and beautiful, to be truly heroes. Maybe to be a true hero you need to die young and beautiful. I don't know. Ancient Greeks thought like that, but now we went a little bit forward in time, and maybe you don't need to do that. Especially you don't need to do that when it's because of shortcomings that you identified. Yeah.
Okay. Actually, I like how you described her as a hero. Do you mind if you can say that on camera? Okay.
Yeah. So one of the things that was mentioned often in the messages I received from all those people beyond the pole sana, which was a common word. The other common word that was mentioned was a word that I used in my article too. It was the word hero. She was called hero in Italian, she was called hero in English, she was called hero in Spanish. And as I wrote in my article in ancient Greece, articles were the heroes were supposed to die young and beautiful. They had this word in ancient Greek, kalos kagathos, beautiful and young. And maybe that's she would have been elevated to the Olympus at that time, a person that would have died young and beautiful, being a hero. We've moved forward in time, and this is no longer necessary. You can be a hero, and you should be a hero for the longest time possible, especially when your life is interrupted by shortcomings, by critical issues, by calls, by call to hearts and call to wisdom and to minds of people that you identified just a few days before. So yes, I was married to a hero. It's something that certainly not many people can say, to have been married to a hero. I knew that she was a hero before she died. I knew she was a hero before she died. She became an immortal hero now for me and for many others who have lost her and shared their, who have lost her even without knowing her, who felt inspired. I would have wanted to know them. There are so many people who wrote to me, I would have wanted so much to know her, particularly my friends who knew that maybe sooner or later they would have had the opportunity, that maybe, as life, the path of life, maybe we would have met her, they would have met her. So Sophia will know that her mom was a hero, will also know that her mom's death was not in vain, and And this is a characteristic of heroes. Their death is not in vain. Their death is not a statistic. It's not just a number. Their death is a story that tells something, a story that teaches something. So that's what I think a hero is. A hero is not only someone who loses his life in a battlefield, who is taking down many enemy soldiers and then eventually gets struck on the battlefield. A hero is someone also who teaches us something and tells us something and tells us to look into what we are doing and the world we live in. And then, also through her death, we realize that she was right. A hero is someone who is missed a lot and who is talked about a lot, remembering how she was just, how she was kind to people. So kindness rather than violence, justice rather than strength, physical strength. I think are the characteristic of a hero, are also the characteristic of a leader, and incidentally are also characteristic of women. Kindness, justice, sweetness. So women can be and are, not only can be, are often heroes, unsung ones. Unsung ones, as she would have been unsung as well, potentially. And I decided to be the singer, to be the poet, as they would have happened in the past, singing about the hero and telling the story of how much a hero she was. Because often, it is true, in this country and in many other countries, my country, heroes are men. The one that fight in the battlefield, the one who die, the Mau Maus, who were men, I think, all of them, if I'm not wrong. The Mau Maus who freed this country are all heroes. What about the women back then? I'm sure that there were women who were heroes too back then, and who may have fought with a rifle, may not have chased out the colonials, but who may have used, wisdom, savviness, kindness, gentleness, and boldness, all together, to achieve something that, physical strength, even mental strength, violence or strength, or in general, fight, does not achieve alone. And that's why I think women play such an important role in the society, because they make sure that change can occur without the need of actually going through that path, but actually going through the other one that is more smooth, very often more successful. And this is seen all over the world. Wherever you have women in position of leadership, the greatest percentage you have of women in position of leadership, the better is the state of that country in terms of all indicators: peace, accountability, happiness of its own citizens, length of life, etc. Child death, mortality, lower. All statistics, medical, epidemiological, societal, political, economical, all of them, they strongly correlate, to use a statistical term, with the number of women who have the opportunity to be in a position of leadership, and therefore to express their boldness, their inner boldness. to be heroes.
You mentioned that you took up the mantle to sing the song of your wife, to praise her and to talk about everything that she had done. In respect to that, what role do you think men have to play in order to ensure that and promote the inclusion of agenda of women, and to celebrate them and to give them the strength and the guidance and support that they need, especially now that you also have a daughter?
Okay, I can answer in two ways. The most right one is men shouldn't have a role in that, in the sense that it should be just natural. So it's not that men should particularly take up a task, which is often the case, men have to ensure that a quota of women are, for example, present in parliament, or are present in an institution. Men have to monitor that there is a gender sensitivity. Men have to make sure that this gender sensitivity is implemented. They have to write projects. How many projects? In every project and health program I have implemented, there is always that, gender component. It's called the cross-sectional issue. So something that you have to make sure that there is always gender inclusion, that there is always a gender attention, and it's, honestly speaking, something that it's working limitedly, because it obliges you to think of women as someone who is weaker and need male support to be able to eventually be able to achieve their potential, to be able to be given an opportunity. So the first way I can answer is men shouldn't do something particular because it should be natural. It should be something that is a given. In a wedding, in a marriage, men and women have identical rights and identical duties. And I have to say, I'm lucky in the context of the drama of the current situation that I've been always a person who has been living under that rule, under that ideal modern rule. It's not a rule; it's an ideal. It's a style. It's something that is inside us. Just men and women are equal. Men and women are two sides of something that is beautiful when they get married, and they've been always an extremely present dad. So I've been always, changing, bathing, feeding, playing, taking care of my daughter, even alone. When Eunice was away, maybe at the hospital, I went alone to Italy for 3 weeks, just myself and my daughter. The police, but at the border here, Kenya said, "Are you sure you're going alone without her mom? How you're going to take care of her?" Well, the fact that I was living under that, with that kind of ideas, that kind of soul in my marriage, actually proved to be critical for the well-being of my daughter now, because I'm left alone and I have to take care of her. Now the fact that I know and I enjoy, not only I know, but I enjoy to change a diaper, to sing to my daughter when I change a diaper. I enjoy to feed her. I enjoy to play with her. It's part of me being a dad on the same level as it was for being a mom for her. Making sure that my daughter will not suffer lack of basic support, basic needs that otherwise, in other contexts, would be there. In many cases, if a husband loses his wife, who has been doing everything for his children, those children will suffer. The man will suffer. The man will not be able to even cook himself a boiled egg. Myself, I've been always a good cook. I actually was the one cooking the most in my house, probably because being Italian, I had a skill on that. But again, what I'm saying is, men shouldn't do something. They should just live in a way that makes sure that women are exactly like them, and they are exactly like women. Whatever they do is the same a woman would do. It's the same their wife, their sister would do. Whatever their sister, their wife would do is also what they do. So there is no flow chart, okay? Even though there are these projects in which there is this big chunk that the donors look at, for example, in my line of business, or have you included a good gender component to make sure that you are implementing gender sensitivity across your program, across your project. Really in life there is no flow chart. It shouldn't be like that. So, but I also know, and this is the second way you can answer the question, I also know that this is often not the case. This is often not the case. It's not the case in households, and it's not certainly the case in many cases in households. There are many cases in which it is. And it's certainly not the case in the society. Women are always, even in the best society, even I think the society, the country where there is the greatest gender parity, it's either Iceland or Sweden or Norway, one of the three, one of the top, those Scandinavian countries. But even there, where there is the greatest parity, there is still a disparity. You see? There is still a disparity. Women keep earning a little bit less than men. Women keep having a little bit less opportunities. Women tend to work a little bit less than men in the sense of fulfilling their professional potential. They are less in education than men, and so on. Even in the best countries, there is that tiny difference. Okay, but they are very close to, let's say, perfection, we can say. So what can we do? I don't know, from a societal point of view, I guess that you will have to, unfortunately, for quite some time, still go with a flow chart, still make sure that there is a real understanding of the importance of women in position of power, but it comes also on the side of the women, and that was something that she wrote in her article in Ask Your Woman Rep. So there were a series of hashtags. One of which was Ask Your Woman Rep, meaning she's a woman in a position of power. Ask Your Woman Rep. For example, boys have 3 condoms, but girls, they don't have 3 sanitary pads. So why a woman in a position of power wouldn't do something to improve the conditions, the conditions that then of girls, of young girls, and conditions that actually will impact on many other aspects. Because you have to know that, for example, when a girl has not access to sanitary pads, her education will be disrupted because the family will not send her to school during the period. Her health will be disrupted because the lack of basic hygiene supplies like sanitary pads will lead to greater risk of infection. Her economic potential will be disrupted because she will not, a woman, she will not be able to go out and do her business or do her biashara, have something that she's doing and to sustain her family. And therefore she will fall in a position of weakness to the man that instead doesn't have this issue, and therefore he can go every day. And it's an issue easily solvable if there would be a sanitary pad, for example, available. So that was just an example, and it highlights the fact that it's not only important that men ensure the presence of women in a position of power, but that women feel also they are entitled to that. They are entitled to make propositions. They are entitled to give bold ideas. They are entitled to make sure those bold ideas are implemented. They are entitled to slam the shoe on the table with the heel, so it makes even more noise. And so that's the other aspect we have to think about when we think about women in leadership, women in power, women and boldness. They have to take it as well. They don't have to be afraid. But indeed, men have the duty, the obligation, and they will see that when they will do that, things will get better. And this has to start from the grassroots, has to start from the married life. Think about violence in the household. How many women lose the first, one of the first cause of death and disability for a woman in reproductive age besides the high risk of complication during pregnancy, which can lead to death or disability, is violence. Violence in the household. Being subjected, and this will create disability, which sometimes is mental disability. It's a depression, it's anxiety, it's a sense of hopelessness. Not plus, of course, also physical disability, because it wouldn't be, it's certainly not the first time, nor the last, that we will hear the news of a woman battered to death by her husband, the relative of her husband, her brother, or villagers, or the mob. Simply maybe because she has a skirt too low, or because she didn't accept an approach that was unwanted. This here and in many other countries, including mine, including Italy. In Italy, it was even coined a word, femminicidio, so the killing of a female, to define the fact that there is a greater percentage of women who are being killed than men by close people who are close to them, so relatives, close relatives, husbands, boyfriends, fiancés. So respect to women starts, and the ability of a country to ensure that women are able to achieve their potential and are able to provide those critical qualities that are needed in a society: kindness, boldness, sweetness, intelligence, that very often are able to have and outsmart even their fellow men. It starts from the family, from the household. It's already being observed that in countries where education is starting to be more open for both genders, women are starting to take a leading role in terms of the number of graduates from disciplines that were considered to be male disciplines. Law, medicine, in countries where education where the access to education is equivalent, is similar, let's say, not equivalent, but similar for men and women. Women are starting to outnumber men in those professions that were considered to be men professions. Women were considered to not be maybe strong enough, smart enough, who knows, for those professions. And yet, it demonstrated that they were wrong.
Apart from Eunice, are there women out there who you feel are displaying qualities of boldness, perhaps, who maybe inspired her or inspire you?
Well, I don't know exactly how to answer this question, also because we don't have. First of all, my memory might fail, and I might say a name instead of another. It might say a name and not another that inspired her as well. But there are certainly individuals, and I don't think, it's even worth to mention, their names. This is not a place probably to pinpoint of that particular person, that particular individual, particularly, if maybe there are individuals who may be in a position of leadership or power, particularly in this time. I don't think it's wise. Also because, the reasons why they may have inspired her are diverse. Because there are individuals who inspired her from a business point of view. Others who inspired her from a medical point of view. Some of her teachers in Dominican Republic, for example. Even some of her teachers here. She mentioned some of them and who were bold, bold, strong. They didn't let be dictated what was right for the patient, maybe simply by another man, for example, or simply fearing that what they were saying, might have been misinterpreted, or they were bold, and they were in a position. They were teachers. They were professors. So in the Dominican Republic, in Canada, and in power too, I suspect, yes, probably there are a few of them. But again, she was critical a little bit of how women, when given the opportunity to exercise power, then they don't use this opportunity enough for the fellow women. She felt that they could have gone an extra mile, they could have done more. That, for example, if an individual is called woman representative, then should represent the women. And she felt that, for example, that mechanism was not sufficiently strong to really making sure that, despite being on paper, despite being on the flow chart, was actually not making a difference in the real life, in the real story of the individuals. So she was inspired, indeed, by many people. But the people who inspired her, again, are not necessarily people who are in a position of power. Well, certainly I can say one person who inspired her mom. That is certainly a person I can nominate who inspired her. Her boldness. Her mom, like myself, became widow. She lost her dad, Eunice, when she was in college in the university in Canada, and her mom was able to pick up the family and make sure that in a time of turbulence like the death of a father in Kenya, or the death of a man, head of a family, and we're talking about several years ago. So now exactly the year, it was early 2000. So things now are a little bit different. Back then were even more difficult probably for women. She was able to make sure that businesses could continue, on which the family was involved in, that the family could remain cohesive. And I can see her leadership of her mom even now, Her mom who had to put in the ground her only daughter, someone who was so much proud of, and yet maintain the capacity to just support me in taking care of her granddaughter, for example. She's a person who inspired her very much. Even my mom inspired her, with her kindness, with her ability to convince people. Yeah, my mom is good at convincing people. It's good at convincing me too. and my dad. So her ability to enter in your mind and to also see the good, to be able to be part, to be there for you. My mom has been there for us right now. She stayed behind, and she has been absolutely fundamental in this period to make sure that I would be able to somehow not completely fall down after this blow. I'm honestly surprised I made it. I wasn't prepared. Despite, the wars, the bombings, I've been under the challenges I faced, the hard work that I had to put in throughout my life. I wasn't prepared for this. And honestly, if it wasn't for my mom, for her mom, and for Sophia, another girl, very small, particularly for Sophia, I would say, honestly, I wouldn't be able to speak to you today, 3 weeks after the death of my wife, with the lucidity I'm able to speak with, in extreme excruciating pain, but being able to understand what I'm doing, it's important. It's important for Eunice, it's important for her mom, for my mom, particularly important for Sophia. And in general, it's important for many other people who may not have otherwise, the opportunities now to be able to enjoy and live the life that Eunice would have wanted her fellow citizens, particularly women, to live. So maybe this is a tiny, tiny contribution to that.
Unless there's something else you'd like to add, then maybe I forgot to ask.
No, I think I've been talking a lot.
Thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I know it's not easy.
No.
Especially with strangers asking you all these questions. But
well,